Hey, Sean Chandler here with the Daily Movie News Roundup. The big thing on my mind today is that it is official. There will be an American remake of The Raid. This go-round, it's going to be directed by Joe Carnahan. This is the guy that directed Narc, The A-Team, Smokin' Aces, The Grey, as well as starring Frank Grillo, the actor that starred in 2 of the Purge movies. He's been in 2 of the Captain America movies. He was in the movie Warrior. Great action star, great director. Put them together. Is this a great combination? Well, let's talk about it. So before I dive into my thoughts on this, how about you? What are your just kind of face value thoughts on, first off, the idea of remaking The Raid in general, and second, Frank Grillo and Joe Carnahan being the creative force behind it? Tell me your thoughts in the comment section. I would love to talk with you about it. So kind of the way the story broke is that a video was published of Frank and Joe watching The Raid and kind of giving little quips back and forth, like, if we made this, the fights would have to be incredible. Well, it's not a remake, it's a reimagining. Should we do this? And they kind of play through this. It's kind of a fun way to make an announcement like this, in particular with 2 guys that the internet community of movie action fans love. These 2 guys. So, on face value, that's really cool. Then Joe takes to Twitter, has several different things to say through a series of tweets, which is kind of funny the way it plays out because it's like back and forth, I hate Trump, and then the next one is talking about The Raid. So he says this: The Raid remake will be closer in tone and feel to The Grey and Narc. The director of the first film is producing alongside and has given us his full blessing. Then responding to an angry tweet, he says, it's not a remake, it's a reimagining of the same scenario. Everybody take a breath. We won't disappoint you, rabid fanboy from hell. Continues onward, Frank and I are going to sit down with Frosty from Collider this week, do an in-depth, and then all your fears will be allayed. And he closes out, you can't remake The Raid, guys. It's a fantastic film. So ask yourselves, why would we be doing it unless we had something really special? So I gotta say, I'm pretty torn on this project because I'm being pulled in 2 different directions for 2 very different reasons. At face value, if you just told me that Frank Grillo is going to star in an action thriller that's probably going to be a hard R directed by Joe Carnahan, I'd say, awesome, sign me up. I'm going to love that movie. That's great news. And that's half of this announcement. The other half of this announcement is that it's a remake of The Raid. But it's not a remake, it's a reimagining of people in the same scenario. And that's where I go, what? And that's what I've kind of thought all along ever since they announced The Raid, where I just went, that's a weird movie to remake. For the simple fact of the matter is there's not a lot of plot there. I'm not like a Raid fanboy. I really like The Raid, but I've only seen it one time. I've been tried to rewatch it recently, but my wife, it's too violent for her. So it's one I have to kind of watch on my own time, and it just keeps getting pushed back. And I haven't even watched The Raid 2 yet. Very much top of my list of things to watch, just hasn't happened yet. But based off having watched it the one time and being involved in all kinds of online discussions about what is the appeal of that movie, it's not the specific scenario of the movie that makes the movie work, that makes it interesting. It's not that these great in-depth characters that have an unbelievable depth to them. It's that it's a very well-directed action movie with great fight choreography. So you take a very simple premise with just very kind of the right characters for that premise, bring in a director that knows how to shoot action with great fight choreography, and you've got a great action movie. But the central idea of the movie is very generic action movie. Team of cops go into a building, find themselves in over their head, and have to battle to get out of the building. That's very basic level action movie plot premise. It does not lend itself to a remake or a reimagining. And just to compare and contrast. When you talk about a remake and a reimagining or a reboot, essentially there's a story or a character that you want to continue telling stories of this character, or you want to retell this story. But for that to really make sense for you to do it, there have to be a number of distinct plot points, distinct characterizations, things that make this story pop and be memorable that you'd want to see it again. So if you take the idea of, say, RoboCop, you have a police officer in Detroit in the not too distant dystopian future where everything's run by an evil corporation, where humans are dehumanized and the police have been privatized and they're owned by this company, and it's capitalism run crazy. A police officer gets gunned down, and so because he's owned by this company, they decide to convert the remaining parts of his body into a robot soldier. Well, that's a lot of really distinct plot points to where you can reimagine that story and tell a bunch of different things with it. You can retell the exact story, you can in some details about it, but there's a lot of really distinct plot points, characterizations, elements to the world that was built there that you go along with. Or you take, I'll explain a plot and you can guess who it is. There's a rich boy who goes to the theater with his parents. His parents get gunned down in an alley when he's a young child. As he grows up, he's raised by his butler and decides to dedicate his life to growing in strength of mind and power and in body so that he can battle crime, not through the police system, but on his own as a vigilante so that no one would ever have to go with what he went through as a child. Well, you know I'm describing Batman. I did not have to say Batman. I didn't have to describe Bat's superhero costume. But you can put the pieces together because there's a lot of distinct plot points along the way. When you talk about the raid, if you describe the plot points along the way, you're really just describing the beats of an action movie plot of where things get really bad and there's a low point. But the premise is so straightforward and simple, it's not like you're talking about distinct unique things. Like, I could not describe to you anything about the lead characters of the movie besides he's married and he's a police officer that knows martial arts. That's all I remember about him, and I don't know that there's all that much more from the movie to really know about him. I mean, he's buddies with his partners and stuff like that. And so why the reason I say all this is, so when Joe Carnahan's like, whoa, trust me, if we didn't have a great take on this, we wouldn't be doing it. Well, I mean, hey, guys, you can't remake it. It's a reimagining. Well, what are you reimagining? The idea of police officers going into a building, finding themselves in over their head, and having to get out of it with cool action sequences? We already got an American version of that called Dredd. It came out like the same year. It's a reimagining of that same basic concept. Here's where I'm going with this. If you reduce the raid down to the basic premise of the story, all you really have is a template of an action movie. It's a little bit like saying you're going to remake Lethal Weapon. Oh, but it's really more of a reimagining. Two cops that don't really get along are forced together as new partners. One of them's a little unhinged. One of them is very stable. And they battle crime together and overcome some bad guy. Well, that story's been told like 100 times. Lethal Weapon is the most famous example of it, but two cops that don't normally get along and cram together, that's just a buddy action comedy. Well, because the comedic elements, but it's a buddy film. That's all it is. And so then that's kind of what they're doing with the raid, the way they're describing it. That's why I'm not even nervous, because I'm sure I'm going to like the movie. I'm sure it's going to be good or good enough. But the thing that made the raid distinct was the action sequences and the way they were directed. That's what made it the raid. The reason we talk about the raid is that distinct action choreography. That's the distinct thing. That's like that Batman origin story for the raid. It's not the in-depth backstory of the characters, the intricate plot with the twists and the turns along the way. It's the fight choreography. Like, that's the thing for it. And Frank Grillo, who's great at action, can't do what they did in that. Joe Carnahan, I don't think he can shoot what they shot in that movie. And I think some of that even goes to just the laws of the way in the United States with insurance and what they can pull off. I don't know that they can, because they spent all of the 90s trying to remake all of this, bring Jet Li and Jackie Chan over, and they never were able to pull off the insanity of the action movies that were made in Hong Kong because of differences in insurance laws and how do you have to pay people and all that stuff, that the studio heads go, no, you can't do that stuff, Jackie. We're not going to fund that. So anyway, that's where I say I'm very confused as why you would call this a reimagining of the raid when it's really just action movie about cops going into a building, which we've seen that story done many times. Dredd being an obvious example of a different time it was done right around that same period of time. And I don't think that Dredd or the Raid were ripping each other off, fully aware of what's going on, like, oh, that's a good idea for a movie. No, it's just such a basic premise for an action story. And if you simplify it enough, that's kind of the plot of Die Hard. A guy goes into a building and gets it in over his head and just wants to get out of it. It's a very basic action plot for an action movie. So, it's a weird movie to remake. I've never understood what they were thinking about. It's not like it has brand recognition enough to warrant, because the people that have brand recognition for the Raid love the Raid, and they're confused as to why you would do this. They've already checked out the Raid. And if you say the Raid to average Joe on the street, he doesn't go, "Oh yeah, I mean, I don't do subtitles," but no, they don't. That's just not what people do. So very odd to me that they would pick this movie to do a remake out of it. At the same time, action thriller with this director and this star, I'm in. So strange mix of emotions on my part. I wish Hollywood just stopped being weird and trying to do mind games and try and guess how to market movies. Just let Joe Carnahan and Frank Grillo make a good action movie and don't call it The Raid. Because if it's a reimagining, there's not a whole lot of plot points to change up here. Like, here's what we reimagined. It's in America now. Oh, mind blown. I don't know. I don't get it. How about you? Tell me in the comment section, what do you think, one, about this combination of actor and director making an action thriller type movie? And part two, what do you think of the fact that it's actually a remake, reimagining of The Raid? Does that seem as strange to you because of the simplicity of the story as it does to me, that it feels much more like it's just like a template for a movie? I don't get it. Anyway, that's my take on it. If you're new to my channel, if you never clicked that subscribe button, please consider clicking that subscribe button. During the work week, I have this daily movie news roundup that you're watching right now. I also do 3 or 4 movie reviews each week, as well as a live show on Sundays where I've got the chat section going on there, interact back and forth with people, because I don't want to just talk about movies. I want to talk about movies with you, and thank you for watching.